Greetings, brothers and sisters in arms. Chaplain Michelle Lawson with the 927th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion here at Soldiers Freedom Outdoors. Today is Saturday of Holy Week. I wanted to give a disclaimer that during the filming of these devotions, no horses were harmed, but the chaplain might be. As you can see, I am holding the palms that I had on Palm Sunday when I spoke to you about how special that day was, how people waved the palms when Jesus came in and they laid them at his feet, at the donkey's feet. And I want you to hear how dry these are. They have no life left in them whatsoever. They've been disconnected from their source, from their tree. They are now lifeless. This relates to what Jesus was telling the disciples in John chapter 15, starting in verse 1, when he was explaining to them that God is the gardener and Jesus is the grapevine and we are the branches. He was telling them that as they abide in him, he will abide in them as he abides in the Lord. It is a symbiotic relationship. We are all together. And while we abide in him, while we are connected to that vine, sometimes there's a pruning process that happens when the Lord disciplines us or when he wants us to see things in our life that is not bearing fruit. And it can be painful at times. But having that loving relationship means that you trust him. When Jesus went to the cross, he took on all of our sin and was separated from God during that time when he became the sin of the world. Because God is a righteous God. He is a just God. He is a God of righteousness and a God of love. That's who he is. We talked about forgiveness on Monday. The focus of today is talking about the difference of forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is a one-person act. I can choose to forgive someone else through God's strength by my own will. Reconciliation is different. It takes two people to rebuild trust together over time, one small act at a time. So forgiveness and reconciliation are two different aspects of a relationship. Just as I am sitting on Buck's back right now. I have no saddle, I have no bridle. There's no bit in his mouth. And if for any reason Buck decided to buck me off, it would hurt. It would be a painful experience for me. And I could choose to forgive Buck for doing that. But in order to reconcile with him, we would have to go through a process together where I would begin to work with him, to brush him, then to eventually saddle him, then to eventually offer him a bridle to see if he would take the bit in his mouth. Then come to the place where I would put a foot in the stirrup and bear weight to see if he could hold me, if he'd be willing. And then I would get on his back eventually. It's one small act at a time between two people rebuilding trust. There's a difference between the two. And just because we choose to forgive someone does not mean it is always safe to reconcile. There are some relationships that can't be reconciled because they're not safe. They're not the kind of relationship that God would want us to be in. One final thought to share with you during this Holy Saturday, when the disciples were without the presence of Jesus, when the world seemed dark and dull because he wasn't there. Think about the times when you've asked people to pray for you because things have felt dark or you have felt despair or hopelessness. And it's so important to you when other people pray. What you may not know is that in John chapter 17, verse 20, this is where Jesus actually began to pray for believers, for us today. And in that prayer, he prayed for unity and protection and our holiness, meaning we show the attributes of God, that we reflect God's character. Jesus prayed for us before he went to the cross. Today's believers, find encouragement in that. I love you. I thank you for what you're doing every day. And let's join together in unity to pray during the days ahead, to continue in prayer.